Hello and welcome to the preview show on My Blue Heaven. I'm here to have a look at our game against the league leaders, the Melbourne Football Club, on Sunday, 3:20 start at the MCG. Expecting pretty good weather. It's very, very cold, a little bit wet in here in Melbourne at the moment. So they are expecting a top of 15 and overcast. So that should be okay as we look forward to pitting ourselves against one of the best teams in the competition. Certainly, based on form and what the D's have dished up so far this year, we've got our work cut out once again after another disappointing result against the Western Bulldogs last week. They've copped a lot of really good press this week, Melbourne, on the back of another really hard-fought win against the Sydney Swans at the MCG, a really low-scoring affair. And once again, we've been under the spotlight, which is okay. When you put that target on your head to play finals football and you're sitting 3 and 5, you're going to cop some heat, and we have copped some heat. But at the same time, we have to go into this game feeling pretty positive, considering we did push the Western Bulldogs, in that third quarter, had them on the ropes at 27 points in front and just couldn't get the job done. So what do we change up? What do we change up this week against another top quality opposition? I'm hoping, because I think, look, Melbourne's last couple of weeks have been good. They have been good, but haven't been great. They beat North Melbourne in Hobart. We all know North are struggling, sitting on the bottom of the ladder, but it was a real grind in the end for them. And last week was nothing special. We know the Swans are a very honest football team, but it was at the MCG. So I'm hoping that maybe there is a little bit of a lull in form. They've been up for a fair bit of time, Melbourne, and I'm hoping for a little bit of flaky Melbourne as well, because we know Melbourne have been a very inconsistent football club for a long period of time now. They've been up and down. They can play some wonderful football and get their supporters very excited. They're a little bit like us, to be perfectly honest. But I'm hoping for flaky Melbourne. Now, the reason why I say flaky is when Melbourne are on, and they have been on this year, they are magnificent. They really look good. Defensively, they're good. They can attack as well. And these magnificent chocolates, I reckon these are probably one of the nicest chocolates going around. But when they get to the point where it's started to break a nut, there's nothing fucking more annoying than trying to shove this down your gob. So I'm hoping we get a bit of flaky Melbourne this weekend. Because I think we may need it just based on form and what the D's have dished up so far. Let's start with the coach's box, because I think if we're honest here and we're realistic, I mean, Simon Goodwin has now been at the football club for a fair period of time now. I think he's coached something like 70-odd games, came in 2017, after Paul Roos had the D's, and had set up a pretty good foundation. And he took them to a prelim final. They played some wonderful football in 2018, but got thumped by the West Coast Eagles. Then they had that horror year in 2019 on the back of some really poor management of players at the start of the season. They won the 5 games, ended up finishing 17th. And last year, it was an up and down season, but it was hard to really judge them, considering that most teams, particularly Victorian teams, going and being based up in Queensland for most of the year, it was really hard to get a really good read on where the D's are at. So they've certainly come out firing this season. So sitting 8 and zip, started off the year beating Fremantle, touched up the Saints, GWS by 34, beat the Cats, who had a few injuries at the time. 50-odd point winners against the Hawks. The big one was the win on Anzac Day Eve against Richmond, where they came from behind to win that game. Beat North in Hobart, and that really hard-fought win, low-scoring affair against the Swans at the MCG last week. It appears Simon Goodwin, 70-odd games. They've brought in Mark Williams to sort of give him that assistance. And I think it's been a really good move, or it appears to be a good move. Watched Mark Williams really closely before the game last week. He certainly was getting around to most of the players in the warm-up before the game and really animated, having deep discussions with a number of the young players, particularly Harrison Petty. So I think that's been a really wise move by the Ds. And on the other side of the ledger, we must consider that David Teague, our coach, has only been in charge for 32 games. And who comes in to give him some assistance this year? Well, 2 weeks ago, we get John Worsfold via Zoom. So I don't know how that's going to pan out, but certainly from a coach's box point of view, you'd have to say that Simon Goodwin is in the box seat, just based on experience and how long he's had this group for. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think there's no doubt for me, just looking at Melbourne, that the penny has dropped. They're led very well by Max Gawn. There's no doubt about that. They've definitely matured, particularly in that midfield with Oliver and Petrarca. And they have a relatively healthy list as well, which I think is important. And we don't like to use injuries as an excuse, but when you look at the players on the sidelines for the Ds, I mean, obviously Adam Tomlinson went down with an ACL, but he's replaced by Harrison Petty. Jack Viney, that's a big out for them because he was in pretty good form to start the season with that toe injury, and they lose Luke Jackson, which I think is a significant out for them with that finger injury, considering what he's been able to do as that relief ruckman for Max Gawn. And he had to go into the middle last week against Tom Hickey because I thought Hickey had the better of Max Gawn last week. But they lose him, but they replace him with a pretty competent forward who can pinch hit in the ruck with Sam Wiedemann, who comes in on the back of some good form in the VFL, kicking 14 goals in 3 games. They're compared to the Western Bulldogs, I don't think they're probably as dynamic as the Western Bulldogs that we played last week, but they're definitely probably better balanced. And as I said before, they pride themselves on that team defence sort of ethos, which I think most teams do. They appear to be doing it just as well as anyone else in the competition. And this is where I mean they look like they've matured because it's really selfless. And they're particularly hard to play against. And I speak about the midfield a lot, about protecting the back six, but even when they have inside 50s against them, their back 6 and 7 can absorb that. So their scores against this year have been they've been as tight as a fish's arsehole down there. I think they've had, 58, 73, 68, 60, 54, 48 against Richmond, 73 and 58. And coincidentally, the 2 biggest scores against the Ds this year have come against 2 of the lower teams. North Melbourne, sitting on bottom of the ladder, kicked 73 against them. And the Saints, who had that lean period there for a while, kicked 73 points against them as well. But they are very, very tight in that back half. But they're not all dour down there. I'll get to the defence a little bit later on. And they are attacking as well. They can attack. Even though it's defence first, they are fantastic on turnover and they can generate a lot of ball inside forward 50. They're averaging 57 inside 50s for the year compared to our 54. And like I spoke about last week, when you look at that and the fact that they're sitting 8 and zip and they've beat some quality opposition themselves in Geelong and Richmond, are we able to have any chance in this game if we're going to let them have 57 inside 50? So I'm thinking we're going to have to try and reduce that and keep them to, hopefully somewhere below 50, which I think is going to be a real difficult task for us. So let's start with the midfield because I think Viney's a big out for them. They have a lot of depth in the midfield, but having him out means they've had to go with a youngster in James Jordan, who was really good last week, mind you, is the NAB Rising Star nominee last week. He's 6'2.5", so he played a really good game against the Swans, particularly early, 23 touches, 8 tackles. But you're relying on a young player, whereas Jack Viney will give you that consistency week in, week out. But their A-graders, their elite is fantastic in there. I don't think it's as good as the Western Bulldogs midfield, but you talk about Oliver, who's just a sensational player, and obviously Christian Petrarca has just gone to another level in the last couple of years, not only as a genuine midfielder, but also as a goal kicker in his own right. And don't underestimate the influence of James Harmes as well. He's had a couple of lean years since 2018, but he's appears to be back somewhere to his best. He's just hard and he's really skillful as well. So that's the sort of core group in there. Be interesting to see which one Ed runs with, Ed Kerner, that is. Is it Petrarca or is it Oliver? Look, Oliver went to Cripps last year when we played them, if you remember that. And he had the better of Patrick Cripps in that game, so that may play out if Cripper does play. So is Ed go to Petrarca? I'm not quite sure, but there will be a run with roll there. But they get great value, Melbourne, obviously from their midfield group and great service from Gawn, who's been a little bit down over the last couple of weeks, but was in terrific form early in the year. But they get great value from their wingers, and this is the area I think we need to be well aware of, because on one wing they have the former Docker in Ed Langdon, who's averaging 25 disposals for the year and has kicked 7 goals. Has been outstanding, and he is a running machine, an absolute running machine. And that could be significant on the MCG. And on the other wing, they've got the luxury of playing Angus Brayshaw. He hasn't been outstanding, but he's a good runner himself. So I know there's big calls to get Matthew Cottrell out of the team and maybe drop Jack Nunes, but I think in this game we might even continue to be a little bit conservative on our wings. Even though we're not getting great drive in terms of possessions, I think the running ability of both Cottrell and Jack Nunes in this game against those Melbourne wingers could be significant. So I think Cottrell may have the big job, not so much locking down. I don't think you lock down on a wing, but going to the wing of Ed Langdon and keeping him honest just with his two-way running. And I think Jack Nunes may go to the wing of Angus Brayshaw. But maybe that won't happen. But them two players are going to be significant, particularly Ed Langdon. If Ed Langdon has any more than 25 touches, I don't think that we win this game. We can ill afford to just let him do what he likes, as he has done for most of this season. Their forwards are dangerous. I think this is a really good forward line that Melbourne have put together. Tom McDonald, obviously, is back to some really good form. Had that really, ordinary year last year, and even 2019 was pretty poor as well. But he's back to his best in regards to his running capacity. He looks confident. He's just really hard-working, got a massive engine. And we know he can kick goals. He's kicked 13 for the year, but he's averaged 16 disposals and taken 7 marks. He likes to push up the ground. Will he give, with no Luke Jackson there, will he be the one to give Gawn a bit of a chop out? We'll just have to wait and see there. I just think it has to be Weeders. Weeders played on him last year and kept him goalless, although McDonald was really out of form at that stage of the year. I know it was only round 2, but he was out of form. He has got a decent record against us, Tom McDonald. He's kicked bags of 4, 4 and 6. So he has got a particularly good record against us, except last year. But he's in terrific form. Ben Brown, just the 2 games after coming across from North Melbourne. He seems to have fitted in really well, and he's dangerous because he too has a decent record against us when he was at North Melbourne. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with Liam Jones playing on Ben Brown, but I'm probably more uncomfortable with Liam Jones playing on Tom McDonald. So I think Liam goes to Ben Brown in the goal square, and that leaves Sam Wiedemann. It's a great replacement, isn't it? You lose Luke Jackson, but you get Sam Wiedemann into the team. And I just think we're going to have to bite the bullet here, and well, not so much bite the bullet, but it's probably going to have to be a really, really big job for Luke Parks. I think playing his 5th game, playing on Sam Wiedemann. Wiedemann's only 195 centimetres, but he's strong above head. And Luke Parks is only 193 centimetres, but he can jump and he is quick. And he is competitive and he is aggressive and he will play man on man. So I think they will be the matchups, but then it doesn't get any easier because they've got fantastic hybrid forwards as well. Bailey Fritsch was a real live wire early in that game last year where he gave Lockie Plowman a lot of headaches. And they've also got Jake Melcham back in some reasonable form across half forward as well. Both those players can play tall and small. Fritsch was ordinary last week, really ordinary against the Swans. But he kicked 6 against North the week before, so expect him to hit back. So it's a big job for whoever that is. Is it Lockie Plowman on Fritsch or is it Lockie Plowman on Melcham? Doc, we got Sard, Liam Stocker, and then they've and last year, if we remember back to that game in round 2, it wasn't the bigs that hurt us, it was their small forwards, and at that stage it was Jaden Hunt playing forward. He's gone to defence, but they had Neil Bullen who had a day out. I think he kicked 2 or 3. And now they seem to be stocked with really fast and aggressive small forwards, Spargo is a real live wire. Cozzy Pickett, who can go into the midfield, just his aggression. I mean, he had a poor one last week, but you can just feel Cozzy Pickett might have not so much a day out, but a real significant impact against us. And not to forget Neil Bullen as well. He's a sharp shooter. So that's a really dangerous forward line that we'll be up against. And I mentioned our midfield being able to protect our back 6. So if they're able to get that ball in there, they're going to be hard to stop, Melbourne, as far as their forwards go. I mentioned their defence before. It's really tight. It really is. And skillful, the Melbourne defence. I think that the beauty about Melbourne's defence is finally, when you look at having a healthy list, they've been able to get Stephen May and Jake Lever on the park together. Obviously, both boys brought to the club around about the same time. Stephen May's a top quality sort of lockdown defender who can give you some drive as well. And we know Jake Lever, he plays that intercept defender probably better than anyone else in the competition. And what they've been able to do, they've brought Harrison Petty in, who will play that selfless role on Levi if Levi is in the team, or if it's TDK forward, he'll play that selfless role on a bloke that's a little bit taller than him, and he'll just be tight and he'll be disciplined. So they are good down there. But I think their weapons, both Lever and May provide a little bit of offence, but their weapons are plentiful down there. I think teams continue to underestimate how good Christian Salem is. He's in all Australian form. He needs to be watched. He had 39 disposals against Richmond and absolutely destroyed Richmond from a half-back flank. He's had over 30 touches 3 times this season. We know how experienced and what a good user of the football Michael Hibbert is, both left-footers from their half-back flanks. Our half-forwards, whoever they're going to be, whether Gibbo still plays or Fogarty plays, whoever it is, Murph comes into the team, they need to be aware that these boys set up so many forward thrusts from that transition from their back half. And we need to be on our guard. And then I think the real X factor for them down there has been the move of Jaden Hunt. I watched him pretty closely against Sydney last week, and he didn't win a lot of the ball, but some of his explosive runs through the middle of the ground, he sort of reminded me a little bit of David Wojcinski. Although I think Wojcinski may have used the ball a little bit better than Jaden Hunt, but just the way those two players are able to break the lines and take the game on, and it's almost they've got a licence to do that. And I'm not a huge Jaden Hunt fan. I think he can be, he can be worked over. But because they're so selfless in the way they play at the moment, Melbourne, it's almost as if they've given him a licence to do what he does. If they get the ball in his hands, or we see him breaking the lines to the centre of the ground, we're going to be in all sorts of trouble. And the other one I really like is Trent Rivers, second-year player, just doesn't put a foot wrong. No one even knows. I mean, hardly anyone knows who Trent Rivers is, but every time we watch him play, it's like, wow, where the hell did he come from? He's as steady as a ship. We have our work cut out. But I don't know. I just got a feeling about this game. I don't know. I just think, I don't know if we've got anything up our sleeve, but I'm not as anxious and nervous about this game as I was against the Western Bulldogs. Maybe it's got something to do with the fact that it's at the MCG, and the fact that midfield of the Western Bulldogs and the way they use the ball, particularly by hand, and they just open you up when they get that opportunity. That if we can somehow put, and this is a big but, if we can somehow put that sort of defensive game plan of Melbourne under some sort of heat with our attacking style of football, because really this game is one of us being ultra attacking compared to Melbourne being fairly defensive. If it is able to click, and we can somehow score, and Jack Hurt's going out because I think he was in reasonable form. But if we can kick a score and put them under some heat, and we have seen Melbourne come back this year, but I don't know, maybe this time we will see a different story for us, just maybe. Just maybe. I've just got a feeling about this game. I don't know. I've just got a feeling about this game based on what I saw last week. I don't think our confidence would have taken a huge hit last week. I don't think it would have. I think we would have taken a lot out of that game into this game at the MCG. Our changes. I mean, who knows? There's one force. Obviously, Jack Silvani goes out. Do we bring in Josh Honey for his second game of AFL football on the back of a 2-goal performance and a very, very good report from Daniel O'Keefe? A very good report. Do we bring him in to really put some heat on that Melbourne defence? I don't know. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see him get a second game and replace Jack Silvani. I really would. I think that'd be a really good move. Then we have calls, and I've mentioned what I think should happen on the wings, but we've got calls from a lot of people for Nunes, Gibbo, Cotters, even Levi to make way. Obviously there's what do we do with Zach Williams? Does he go back? Well, I don't know. So there's a lot of questions, and then we've got TDK, 2 games now back in the VFL. But do we bring him in? How do we want to bring him in? Can you play TDK and Pitt? Can you play just TDK as 70% up forward and 30 in the ruck? Because I don't think you can put Pitt forward. I just don't think that's going to work. So I don't know. I mean, the club obviously will have a plan for that. And then you've got Newman and Mark Murphy to come in. I would like to see Josh Honey come in, but I think the one I would probably like to see come in is Paddy Dow. I don't know who he replaces. They can work that out for themselves. But the reason why I'd like to see Paddy Dow come in, because I think he was okay in the VFL. I think he's been okay for the last 2 weeks. I think he's gone back and performed strongly. But I think the area of strength for Paddy Dow is his clearance work. And I think on the back of a 23-7 thumping in clearances out of the middle, something needs to be done there. It really does. And I think what Paddy Dow, we saw when he played that first 10 minutes before he got injured a couple of weeks back at the MCG, that he looked like he was in good form in regards to his clearance work, and he was excellent in his clearance work in the VFL last week. So that is, if I look at a midfielder, do we want to beef up our midfield a little bit, particularly in the middle of the ground with some impact? I would like to see Paddy Dow come in. I really would. I think that'd be a really good change for us. Anyway, I'm really confident about this game. I really am. I think out of all the all the top teams who played this year, I'm feeling more confident about this one than anyone else. That makes me a pretty fucking mad person, I know. Anyway, I'll be there on Sunday, and I will have a review of the game sometime on Monday. Catch you soon. Go Blue Baggers.